Are you afraid to trust God again due to disappointment in the past? If so, stay tuned and I will teach you how to start rebuilding your faith today. What is going on, everyone? We are back for another episode of Prospering with Christ. I hope that you had a wonderful week last week, and I hope that this week will be just as amazing to you as well. So for today's episode, we are discussing how to rebuild your faith after experiencing a disappointment. And I am so excited to talk about this today because disappointment is something that we are bound to experience on our faith journey. Sometimes the things that God promises you is not going to come when you expect them to. Sometimes you are going to put yourself out there, you are going to try, you are going to take a risk, and you will be disappointed. And when you experience disappointment, it hurts, it doesn't feel good, and it makes you afraid to step out and try again. It makes you afraid to step out and trust God again. It makes you afraid to put yourself out there again. Disappointment makes us not want to ever step out and have faith again. And I think the reason why this happens is because a lot of us do not prepare for the negative emotions that are going to come when we are on our faith journey. When we think about our faith journey, we always think about everything going good. We always think about everything going as planned. We always feel like the journey is going to be easy. And I feel like if we start being real with ourselves from the start, if we start being real with ourselves and telling ourselves that there's going to be hard times, there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be failures, there's going to be disappointments, and we prepare for the emotions that are going to come when those times occur, we will be able to push past those emotions. See, for a lot of people, you allow the disappointment to blindside you. You weren't prepared for it. And so when it happens, you don't know how to deal with it. When it happens, you give into it. But if we start accepting that disappointment is something that's going to happen while we're on our journey, we will be able to properly prepare for it and recognize it when it's arising in our lives. And we'll have the tools, we'll have the knowledge, we'll have the wisdom to be able to push through and get through it and continue to trust God to get to our breakthrough. I know that disappointment sucks, but it is something that every single person on this earth will experience at least once in their lives. There is not one person who can say that every single thing that they set out to do, they were successful at every single time. There's not one person who can say that they never experienced a failure. There's not one person who can say that they never experienced a setback. There's not one person who can say that they never experienced an obstacle. Every single person on this earth is bound to have disappointment arise in their lives. The problem is not the disappointment coming. The problem is how you deal with the disappointment. The problem is if you accept the disappointment and you allow it to make you turn back and turn away from the things that God is trying to do for you. And it's time for us to stop allowing disappointment to kill our faith. It's time for us to start rebuilding our trust with God even when things do not go our way. There are repercussions to giving in to disappointment. And one of the reasons why we even give in to disappointment is because we allow the disappointing experience to confirm the insecurities and the negativity that we already had. We like to use disappointments as an "I told you so." I told you that this wasn't going to work. I told you that you weren't good enough. I told you that you didn't have what it takes. I told you that you didn't look the part. I told you that you didn't have the right mindset. I told you that they wouldn't like you. We use the disappointment that we experience as an "I told you so" to make ourselves feel bad for even stepping out and trying, to use as an excuse as to why we should never step out and try again, as to why we should never step out and take that risk again, as to why we should never put ourselves out there again. Every time we experience a disappointment, those negative thoughts and those insecurities grow louder and louder because we use that disappointment to water that seed. We use that disappointment to continue harvesting that seed. Instead of throwing that seed away, instead of getting rid of that seed, we use this experience, we use this disappointment, we use this failure to water it, to allow it to grow inside of us. And the more it grows inside of us, the more we begin to adapt what it's telling us, the more we begin to believe what it's telling us. But if you're truly ready to rebuild your faith, you're going to have to shift your perspective. This experience is not a way for you to prove that negativity right. This experience is not a way for you to prove the devil's lies that he implanted in you right. There is a reason for every situation. Maybe God wanted you to experience this disappointment because it's not the right time. Maybe God wanted you to experience this disappointment because there was something that he wanted you to learn in this season. Maybe God wanted you to experience this disappointment because there's something he was trying to expose to you in this season. There was some people that he was trying to expose to you in this season. There was some things that he was trying to expose to you in this season. And you're so focused on watering that negative thought. You're so focused on watering that insecurity that you are literally missing the thing that he's trying to do for you. You are literally missing the thing that he's trying to prepare you for. You are literally missing the lesson that he's trying to teach you. You're focused on the wrong thing. This situation is not an I told you so situation. This situation is a stepping stone to get you to God's yes. This situation is a step that you had to take to get to your breakthrough. And the reason why you haven't been experiencing your breakthrough is because you allowed this one disappointment, you allowed this one failure, you allowed this one mess up to make you turn your back on God, to make you not trust God, to make you not ever try again, to make you not operate in faith again, to make you not work by faith again. You turned around and went the other way. You turned around and went back to what was comfortable. But God was saying, if you really want to follow me, if you really want to do things my way, if you really want to get the things that I have for you, you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. If you really want to have the breakthroughs that I have for you, you're going to have to get uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is not just doing things that's uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is putting yourself out there. Uncomfortable is confronting your insecurities. Uncomfortable is pushing past that negative thought, even when your life looks like what the negative thought is telling you. Real faith is going against what you see and believing God for what you want. So what happens when you're believing God and what you see don't match up to what you want? What happens when you're taking that step that God told you to take and what you see is not matching up to what God promised you? That is not a sign for you to give up. That is not a sign for you to give into your disappointment. That is not a sign for you to allow your disappointment to confirm your insecurities, to confirm your negative thoughts. That is a sign for you to keep pushing through in faith. That is a sign for you to keep trusting God in faith. That is a sign for you to really prove to God that you have faith, that you're going to say to him, I understand that this is what I see. I understand that this is what happened. I understand that this is the result of the thing that you told me to do, but I'm going to still push past what I see because I know you will never lie to me. I'm going to continue to push past what I see because I know you have better for me. I'm going to continue to push past what I see because I know that this is a stepping stone on my journey to my breakthrough. This failure, this disappointment is not an I told you so moment. This failure and this disappointment is going to be proof to God if you truly have faith, if you're actually talking about it or if you're actually doing it, if you're actually living out the things that you always say that you do. Your true faith is exposed not in the good times, but in the bad times. Your true faith is exposed in the moments where everything is going in the opposite direction of what God promised you. This moment is when God is going to see how much faith you really have. Do not give into the devil's tactics. Do not water that insecurity. Do not water those negative thoughts. Do not allow those thoughts and those insecurities to kill the things that God promised to do for you. God is not a liar. God is never going to promise you something that he never planned to give to you. If it didn't happen this time, then thank God that it's going to happen the next time. If it doesn't happen the next time, then thank God that it's going to happen the time after that. But whatever you do, do not allow this insecurity to kill your breakthrough. And I know that this is easier said than done. I know it's easy to say that you should continue going after you experience the failure. I know that it's easy to say that you should continue going after you've been disappointed, after you put yourself out there, after you had faith, after you trusted God with your whole heart and your whole soul, and you did it with confidence just for things to not work out for you. I understand that it's easier to say to get up and try again, but you have to. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid because you don't want to go through this again. You're afraid because you don't want to experience this again. You're afraid because you don't want to put yourself out there and have your heart broke again. You're afraid because you don't want to put yourself out there and have your faith killed again. But you have to understand that the journey never feels good. It never feels good when you're taking the trip to get to the destination. But when you get there, that's when you experience peace. When you get there, that's when you experience comfort. When you get there, that's when you realize that everything that you went through on this road, everything that you went through on this journey was worth it. because you got a beautiful end goal. You got a beautiful destination. You got to enjoy and experience this beautiful thing that God promised you. And although you're afraid to try again because you don't want to experience how it felt to be disappointed, you don't want to experience how it felt to fail ever again, it's going to feel worse if you turn around and you stop trying. It's going to feel worse if you continue to go day by day doing the same things that you're doing now. Where you are currently is not God's best. If you continue to stay in this place, if you continue to stay in this place where God told you to get up from, where God told you to leave, you will always feel unfulfilled. You will get to the end of your road, the end of your life, in regret. Regretting that you never lived life to the fullest, regretting that you never experienced the things that God promised to do for you. It's going to be much more painful if you turn around and go back to where you came from instead of pursuing forward, instead of pushing forward, instead of pushing past the emotions, instead of pushing past the negative experiences to get to the beautiful end desire. You have to keep going on your journey. And as you continue to push past that disappointment, to push past that failure, to push past the negative thoughts and the insecurities that's telling you that I told you so, as you continue to do this, as you continue to do things God's way, you're going to have to let your guard down. See, for a lot of people, after you experience a disappointment, you tend to put a guard up. You put a guard up to protect yourself because you don't like how it felt to feel disappointed. You don't like how it felt to experience a failure. So you put a guard up to protect yourself. You put a guard up because you're afraid to get your hopes up anymore. Every time that you pray for something in the future, you expect the worst because you're afraid of expecting the best, and then the best doesn't come. And now you're disappointed again. And now your faith has died again. And now you don't want to trust God again. And now that insecurity gets in your head and you're watering it again. We put a guard up to protect ourselves from the emotions that's going to come if we experience another disappointment or failure. But we have to understand that this protection is not faith. Faith is not expecting the worst. Faith is not expecting for things not to work out. Faith is not saying that it will never happen. Faith is not killing hope. If you continue to operate with this guard up, you will experience nothing but disappointments. And it's not because God doesn't love you. It's not because God doesn't have the best for you. It's not because God is a liar and he was never going to give you what he promised you. It's because your guard is killing your faith, and God only operates on faith. You attract what you say. You attract what you think. And if you allow this guard to kill your expectation, if you allow this guard to make you think and expect for the worst, then the worst is the only thing that you're going to attract. The worst is the only thing that's ever going to come into your life. God cannot work with that guard up. God cannot help you with that guard up. You're going to have to become real with him. If this disappointment scared you, if this disappointment traumatized you, if this disappointment made you afraid to ever step out and try again, instead of putting that guard up, instead of operating in that place, you're going to have to give it to God. Give it to God and ask him to help you. Tell him that you can't handle it. You will never operate in faith by fear. How can you operate in faith when you are guarding yourself because you're so afraid of what the outcome will be? You're putting more trust in the worst case scenario, because if you truly trusted God, if you truly believed that things were going to work out, if you truly believed that everything was going to come to pass that God said was going to happen for you, there will be no reason for the guard. The reason why you have that guard up is because you're telling God, yeah, I hear you. Yeah, you said this was going to happen. Yeah, you said this was going to do it, but I don't trust you. So I'm going to put this guard up. I'm going to put this wall up. I got to protect myself just in case you're lying to me, just in case you're not telling me the truth, just in case you're playing with me. The fact that you're putting a wall up to protect yourself from God is proof that you are allowing the disappointment that you experience to kill your faith, to hinder your faith. You believe more in the disappointment than you do God. And don't get me wrong, I completely understand why you would do that, because you actually experienced the disappointment and you didn't experience the thing that God told you was going to happen for you. So because you actually experienced the disappointment, because the disappointment actually was birthed in your life, it's easier to believe that this is what's going to happen versus the thing that God told you that never happened before, that you never experienced before, that you've been working towards and it never came true for you before. But like I said, true faith is going against what you see. Maybe God allowed that disappointment because he's trying to test you. Maybe God allowed that disappointment because he wants to strengthen your faith. He wants you to start going against what you see. He's asking you every single time that something bad happens in your life, is your faith going to go down? Is your trust for me going to go down? Are you going to believe more in that situation than you believe in me? Because if you do, then the devil can easily get to you. Every single time that I try and talk to you, every single time that I try to work something in you, every single time that I try to bring something to you, all he has to do, all the devil has to do is change your circumstances and allow you to see something in your life, and you're going to trust him more than you trust me. God is saying, I'm allowing this to happen because this is going to help rebuild your faith. This is going to help strengthen your faith. And he cannot strengthen your faith as long as you have that wall up. So you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision to go past every insecurity that you experience, every negative thought that you experience. You have to stop watering it and allowing this disappointment to confirm that thing in you. You're going to have to go past the way that this disappointment makes you feel and step out and try again. And you're going to have to let your guard down and trust God, fully trust God, believe more in what God said than what you currently see. Are you enjoying this episode so far? Is this episode teaching you how to push past your disappointment? If so, then I want you to do me 2 favors. Favor number 1, I want you to leave a review and let me and others know how you are enjoying the show. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this episode. Leave an honest review and let me know how you are enjoying the show. And favor number 2, if you know anyone who has been experiencing a lot of disappointments in their life, maybe they allowed those disappointments to kill their faith and are struggling to get up and trust God again, then I want you to send this episode to them. Let this episode motivate and encourage them the same way that it is motivating and encouraging you. Now let's get back to the show. I feel like a big reason why we experience disappointment is because when God tells us something, we automatically think that the things that God promised us is supposed to happen now. But we have to realize that although God promised us this thing, he never said when. He never said when it was going to come to pass. He never said when it was going to happen. He didn't say that it was going to happen right now, this very moment. He didn't say that the very first time that you stepped out and tried, you were going to get that blessing. You were going to get that breakthrough. That thing was going to happen in your life. He never told you when. And the problem is we get that promise from him, we start working towards it, and we think in our head that this is going to happen immediately. And sometimes it might happen. Sometimes it might happen now. But there might be times where God promised you something that he's not going to birth right now in this very moment. The perfect example of this is the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised them that they were going to have a child. God promised them that they were going to be parents. And they were both old, so it was already hard for them to even believe that this was possible. But even though he told them that, it didn't happen immediately. It took years for that promise to be fulfilled in their lives. They got so desperate that they tried to man-make the very thing that God told them was going to happen. They tried to man-make the very thing that God told them he was going to do through both of them, not through Sarah's maid, through both of them. It didn't happen immediately. So yes, there are things that God can promise you. Yes, there are things that God can say he's going to do for you that's going to happen now. It's going to happen this month. It's going to happen this year. It's going to happen soon. But every single thing that God promises us is not meant to happen in this specific season of our lives. Some of the things that God promised you, you may not experience until 5 years later. You may not experience until 20 years later. Some of the things that God promised you, you may not experience while you're even on this earth. And the problem is every single time God tells us something, we think it's a now thing. We think that this is something that God plans to do now. So when we start working towards it and it's not happening, we begin to get disappointed. And sometimes it can be a now thing. Sometimes it can be something that God intends to do soon in your life, but he didn't intend for it to happen the very first time you tried. Maybe he intended for it to happen the 17th time that you tried. But you allowed that first disappointment to stop you from ever stepping out and trying again. And God is saying, you do not know the time or place that I am going to bring you what I promised you. Instead of just taking what God promised you and running with what you think is best, how about you take it to God and ask him what you should do with it? Is this something that he even wants you to work towards now? Is this something that you should be expecting to happen in your life now? Is this something that he wants you to focus on now? Yes, I'm going to continue to have faith for it, but should I be having faith for it to happen now? Should I be having faith for this to be birthed in my life now? Sometimes we bring unnecessary disappointment in our lives because we are expecting the things that God promised us to happen now, even when he didn't say that right now was the time. I have been guilty of this so many times in my past. There has been things that God promised to do for me, that God promised to use me to do for other people years ago, 2-3 years ago. And I was sitting there mad because I'm like, none of these things that you said I was going to do has happened. And God had to get real with me. God had to check me and he had to say, I never told you when. Think about the moment I told you that I was going to use you for that. Think about the moment I told you that I was going to do this in your life. I never said when it was going to happen. You just took that promise and you decided that it was going to happen now. You decided that it should happen now. You decided that this needed to come to pass now. But I never said that for you. I never told you that. I never said when. And when we take God's promises and we put our own deadlines on it, that is us creating our own plan. We are using what God gave us to create our own plan instead of taking this promise back to God and saying, God, how do we do this? God, where do we go from here? God, when do you want to use it? We did not take God's promises back to him and get his plan, get his timeline, get his time of events. We take it and we create what we think is best, and we cause unnecessary disappointment in our lives. We cause unnecessary disappointment that we have to go through and we have to get over. We cause unnecessary unbelief in our lives. And you have to ask yourself, even though you want this thing to come to pass in your life now, could it be that God is allowing you to experience disappointment because he has a better time to give it to you? See, the problem with a lot of us is that we think that we know best. We always think that we know best, and we always think that we know the right time for things to happen. But have you ever had a moment in your life where you really thought you knew everything? You really thought that this was the right time. And then a couple years go by and you look back at that experience and you realize how crazy you sounded. You realize how stupid you sounded. You realize how you were not mature enough, how you were not truly ready. You realize that you were not truly ready for the thing that you thought you needed in that season. My point is, just because we think it's the right time does not mean it's the right time. God knows better than us. God looks at the bigger picture. God doesn't just look at our circumstance. He looks at our mentality. He looks at our spiritual life. He looks at our discipline. He looks at our character. He looks at every single thing. He looks at every single piece of the puzzle, and he uses that to determine if this is the right time for him to bring the things that he promised you. And right now you are sitting here thinking that you are ready for it. Right now you are sitting here thinking that this is the perfect time for God to do it. But when God does it in his actual perfect time, you are going to look back at this moment and realize you were crazy for even wanting it right now. Sometimes God is allowing you to experience disappointment because he has a better time to bring it to you. Have you ever dreamed of making your voice heard and sharing your message with the world? Well, it's time to turn that dream into a reality by starting your very own podcast. I understand that many aspiring podcasters are held back by the worries of cost, complexity, and the time it takes to launch a podcast. That is why I'm excited to announce my new training program that has all the tools and knowledge you need to launch your very own podcast for free. My training will guide you through every single step of your podcast journey. You will learn how to plan, release, market, and grow your podcast from start to finish. So if you're ready to take a leap of faith and share your message with the world, click the link in the description below to access my new podcast training. Now let's get back to the show. And sometimes we're just so focused on it happening now that we are doing everything in our power to make it happen. And God is saying, you cannot go before me. I promised you that, which means that I'm going to do it for you, which means that I'm going to bring it to you. This is not going to happen in your power. The reason why you're trying so hard is because I didn't anoint that. The reason why you're trying so hard is because I didn't ordain that. I didn't tell you to work hard to get this to happen now. I didn't tell you to make this blessing. If I promised it to you, I'm going to bring it to you in my divine timing. Stop trying to go before God. Stop trying to move faster than God is moving. Stop trying to run ahead of God and get behind and follow. Get behind and trust him. Get behind and allow him to guide you. And I don't want you to think that there's anything wrong with expecting blessings to come to pass, especially now in your life. But I'm saying that if it doesn't happen when you think it should happen, do not allow that to make you disappointed. Do not allow that to discourage you. Do not allow that to kill your faith. Do not allow that to make you turn away from God and start trying to figure things out on your own. And do not be so desperate for it to happen now that you try to make those blessings. You try to make your own plan. You try to go ahead of God and do things your own way. Everything is going to happen God's way and is going to happen in God's divine timing. And some of you may be wondering, like, why won't God just bring it to me now? Why isn't this the right time? What if you have what it takes to handle the blessing? What if you have the right prayer life? What if you have the right amount of faith? What if you have the right character and finances and wisdom and all those other things to handle this blessing? Why isn't God bringing it to you now? But have you ever thought that maybe God wanted you to experience this disappointment because now that you had to go through something to get it, you will value that breakthrough more. You will value that blessing more. See, if he just gave you the blessing and you didn't have to go through anything to get it, if he just gave you the blessing and you ain't have to put no blood, sweat, or tears in it to get it, you wouldn't really value it. You would treat it like it's nothing. You will mismanage it. You will treat it like whatever. But because you went through so much to get here, because you had to work so hard to get here, because you had to basically crawl to get here, because you had to experience so many failures, setbacks, and disappointments to get here, because you spent so many nights crying because you wanted to be here so bad, you were working so bad, and nothing was working out for you, you value this blessing more. It means more to you. You cherish it more. You're not going to get comfortable in this blessing. You're not going to get this blessing and then be like, okay, whatever, on to the next. No, you will value this blessing more because you went through so much to get here. No matter why God allowed this disappointment to happen, it happened for a reason. And so you're going to have to make a decision today. Are you going to allow the disappointment and failure you experience to keep you stuck? Or are you going to take that leap, step out on hope again, and start rebuilding your faith with God? And if you want to start rebuilding your faith with God, let's talk about the steps that you need to take to rebuild faith after experiencing a disappointment. So the first thing that you have to do to rebuild faith after disappointment is shift your perspective. The reason why this disappointment is discouraging you is because you are looking at it the wrong way. You are allowing this disappointment to confirm the insecurities and negative thoughts that you have already had in your head. You are allowing this disappointment to make you feel like a failure. You are allowing the devil to use this disappointment to tell you that God is a liar, to tell you that God was never going to do the things that he promised to do in your life. Instead of looking at the negative sides of this disappointment, look at the positives. Think about how God loves you so much that he's teaching you something in this season. Think about how God loves you so much that he's exposing things to you in this season. Think about how God loves you so much that he's allowing you to be one step closer to your breakthrough. Every single time that you experience a disappointment in your life, celebrate it, because you are one step closer to your breakthrough. You may have gotten a no right now, but you're about to get a yes soon. You may have gotten a no right now. You may have gotten 10 no's right now, but you're 2 no's away from your yes. Celebrate every time you fail. Celebrate every time you experience a disappointment, because this disappointment is not for a reason. There's a lesson in this situation, and every single time that you learn the lesson, you are one step closer to your breakthrough. The second thing that you want to do to rebuild your faith after a disappointment is you want to step out and try again. But when you step out and try again, you don't want to do it the exact same way. If you failed the first time, then trust and believe that if you go at it the exact same way that you did the first time, you are going to fail again. You are going to be disappointed again. Instead of doing it the exact same way, you want to reflect on your plan. You want to reflect on the steps that you took, and you want to ask yourself, what can I do differently this time? How can I tweak what I did so that I won't be disappointed next time? How can I make this work the next time that I try at it? This reminds me of the story of Henry Hines. And for those of you who do not know who Henry Hines is, he is basically the guy who created ketchup. I watched a documentary about him a few years ago. And when I was watching the documentary, they were basically telling the story of him creating ketchup. And did you know that he failed at creating ketchup over 100 times before he got it right? But every single time that he failed, every single time that he created a concoction and him and his brother tasted it and it was disgusting, they didn't give up. They tried again, but every single time that they tried again, they tweaked it. They added ingredients to it. They used less measurements. They changed how much time they let it cook. They tweaked it in some type of way every single time that they tried again. It would have been so dumb if they tried it the very first time and failed at it and realized it was nasty. And then when they stepped out and tried again, they did it the exact same way. Every single time they tried again, they tweaked something. They did it a little bit differently. And after 100 times, they finally got it right. They finally got the recipe that made them a billionaire till this day. My point is, when you go at it next time, you need to go at it differently. You need to tweak something and tweak the way that you did it. Do not do it the exact same way. Do not continue to do the things that caused the disappointment. Do not continue to do the things that caused the failure. Tweak it and make it better. Go at it better. And don't just figure this out on your own. Get with God. Every single time that you fail, take your strategy to God. Take your step to God and ask him, God, how can I do this in a better way? How can I tweak what I did and make it successful? How can I tweak what I did and make it work? Seek his instructions and get his help to become successful, to get to your breakthrough. And I kind of talked about this just a minute ago, but the next thing that you want to do when you're trying to rebuild faith after disappointment is you want to look up stories on successful people. Who are some people who inspire you? Who are some people who have success in similar ways that you're trying to achieve, who you feel connected to? Look up their stories. And I don't want you to just look up the stories of what they achieved. I want you to look up the stories of their starting points. Pay attention to the things that they had to go through to get to where they are today. Like I said, with the story of Henry Hines, till this day, he left a huge legacy even though he died decades ago. But his start, the journey that he had to take to get there, was awful. He failed over 100 times. Ketchup was not even the first business that he started. He tried to start so many other businesses and he failed so bad that people thought he was a scammer. He even got arrested because the police thought he was a scammer. He wasn't a scammer though. He was just very bad at business. He mortgaged his parents' home and used that money to start a business that failed, which ultimately led to his arrest. He didn't have a happy start. And if you pay attention to the journey that majority of successful people went through to get to where they are today, you will realize how many failures they experienced. You will realize how many disappointments they experienced. But at the end of the day, they came out on top. At the end of the day, there was always a beautiful ending to that horrible start. And just like God did it for them, he will do it for you. So when you're looking up these stories of successful people, don't just look at it like, oh, okay, they went through this. Use it as motivation. If God can do it for them, if God can bring them out of that, he can do the very same thing for you. And the last thing that you want to do to rebuild faith after experiencing a disappointment is you want to ask God for strength to get up again. Because sometimes you're not going to have the strength. Sometimes you're not going to feel like stepping out and trying. And if you don't have the strength, then cast your cares on God and ask him for his help. Ask him to help you and he will. Ask him to give you strength and he will. And so remember, do not let the disappointments that you experience confirm the insecurities and negative thoughts that you were already thinking. Do not allow the disappointments that you experience make you put a guard up and be afraid to trust God or step out on faith again. Remember that although you want this breakthrough now, God knows the perfect time and he never told you when. If it doesn't happen now, everything happens for a reason and it's going to happen in God's perfect timing. And if you experienced a disappointment and it's affecting your faith, all you have to do is shift your perspective on the disappointment. Stop focusing on the negatives and start focusing on the positives. Try it again with a better plan. Go at it differently and seek God for instructions on how to perfect it next time. Look up stories of successful people and pay attention to the struggles, failures, and disappointments they experienced on their journey. And ask God for strength to try again. And so my challenge for you this week is I want you to look up 3 successful people and pay attention to the struggles that they went through while they were on their journey. You can write out the struggles that stick out to you. You can highlight the struggles that stick out to you, but look up 3 successful people and specifically look at the struggles they went through and how God brought them through it. And so that is all I have for you today. If you enjoy what you heard, make sure that you subscribe so that you get a notification every time a new episode is released. Also, leave a review and let me and others know how you are enjoying the show. You can also follow me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook at Prospering with Christ, or join my private Facebook group where we take these topics and we dive a lot deeper into them during the week. And the link to that will be in my bio. But that is all I have for you today, and I will see you next week.